Welcome to the Playlist Podcast, where we talk to artists, designers, engineers, athletes, musicians, authors, all different kinds of people from all walks of life to uncover a little bit about them and the video games that influence them along the way. I'm Benjamin Dawe. This is Playlist Episode 1, and we are talking today to game director, creative director, and current studio design director at the 3000s in Melbourne, Australia, Mauro Fiore. Now, this is a really interesting conversation as Mauro has worked at Rockstar, Zynga, EA, and he's been in the industry for 25 years. And this conversation not only covers like a really wide variety of titles, but gives some great insights into design philosophy and, the way Mauro has approached such a variety of genres over the span of his 25 years. So let's jump in. Welcome to the podcast. I think it'd be really great, for people to really kind of understand the way you introduce yourself or the way you describe yourself, because you've been in the industry for a really long time. How do you define yourself?
Well, it's the year 2025, and that means I've been doing games professionally for 25 years, which is, I started in 2000, so I highly recommend, you start milestones on round years, and it makes it easy. Round numbers makes it easy to remember these milestones. 25 years. I've worked at Rockstar Games. I was there for 10 years. I worked at Zynga, I think for like 3 or 4 years. I worked at a little startup sponsored by Line Kong and 4Game. And I worked for EA. And now I'm here in Melbourne being the studio director for the 3000s, and 25 years I've covered console games, covered Facebook social games, and mobile games. And now it feels like the worlds are all colliding finally. I think I remember when I left Rockstar, I was like, maybe I'll come back to console when it all finally converges. And I think maybe 25 years, it's maybe finally converging.
Yeah,
hard to define it all and, define myself. I think change is always the word I use, right? I think it's the only constant in games. And so being adaptful and watching the technology change around you and using it.
25 years in gaming, it's like dog years, right? I think the average career in gaming is like 5 years. And because of the rapid change and because of the stress and demands and now just the acceleration of technology, I think, it's an incredible achievement.
It is dog years. Now I have the camera. I see these, send me these, what do you call these? These it's stress marks from trying to actually ship games and getting them to market, which is, half the challenge. And then making sure they're fun, profitable. It's hard.
When did you first know you wanted to, get into the games industry? What was that first light bulb moment?
It's crazy because that'll almost like take you right back to the beginning. So not just 25 years, I think you're going right back into my life. I'm actually approaching 50 and 47, 48. But I think I was like 4 or 5 years old when I had the chicken pox. They didn't have the vaccine back then. So you got the chicken pox. And I was sick. And so my dad decided to kind of cheer me up. He brought home an Atari 2600. And so that was, my origin story, my first exposure to video games. And so he's a car mechanic. And so what he did, right, is he bought games that looked like cars, right? So he bought Indy 500 and Enduro. And so I got to play, I played combat, obviously with my dad. Everyone kind of played combat, and you got kind of like this couch, multiplayer play. But, feeling that kind of connection with my dad and understanding or relishing, I guess, in the impact you can have. Like, I think about that moment all the time with my children now. I took out my camera just the other day and I gave it to my daughter just because I wanted her to I'm like, look, this is ISO, aperture, and shutter speed, and depth of field and, stop motion and all these things that you kind of take for granted when you just shoot from your little phone. And so I wanted to teach her that, and maybe, who knows, she ends up being in a career in photography or film from that moment. Maybe that's her Atari moment. So it's always fun. And I think you'll see as we talk about these games that define me, often the acquisition of the game is so memorable, not only just the game itself.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, the acquisition part, because like I remember being a kid and, I mean, I grew up in a pretty poor family, but the things that you most desired, and then when you got them and it was like such a slither of like achievement to get the thing, which I think nowadays, because there's an abundance of everything and everything streaming and it's just, yeah, I know, I
They
feel
do.
that's kind of lost,
But that's actually where
lost
the
on kids,
monetization
right?
comes from now, right? Is that
Yeah,
monetization just shifts to like these different items. That's just table stakes.
yeah.
And then you want the things that are more exclusive.
So with the games you mentioned, the Indy 500, which was Atari, so that would have been about, I mean, the game came out in 77. So how old would you have been?
Wow. Well, so I was born in 77. So I must have been about 5. I think I was 5. I think it was
Yeah.
83. It felt like 82, 83, something like that.
Okay.
So I was able to grasp it. I was able, the controller, that's a paddle controller.
Yep.
I'm one of the few that you can actually play with a paddle controller and feel like you're driving. But, I soon gravitated to Enduro more than Indy. Indy was fun to play with my dad. Enduro was a single player game. So it really felt like me against the machine. And I actually think that fusion between your human and machine has always kind of stayed with me throughout my career. That's the interest that I have, right? And in the 80s, it's not hard. And Terminator was a movie, and so a man and machine, cyborgs, they were all the rage dudes. So anyway, this game, you pass cars, and that's your kind of metric. But the scenes would change. You go from like daylight to sunset to fog, where half the screen was gone, and to night, where it was only just these little red dots, and then it would kind of repeat, and you could keep playing it. But it was that change of level always was a motivation to kind of keep going, and that simple gameplay. So I really enjoyed that game.
Obviously now, like looking at Enduro, like it looks like an Atari game, but can you remember back when you were a kid, like did it feel real? Like was that the kind of experience?
No, I mean, it didn't feel real, but it felt convincing.
Convincing.
Like,
Yeah.
like the tires, I think they have like missing pixels for tread marks. Like that's how they kind of, render texture. Like it's just a missing vertical line, but it's believable. And it had good, I would say reaction or animation. So you like when you hit and you finally get it, and it would stun you. And then all these cars would pass you, go back here. And so you had this lovely penalty. So like even though that animation was well weighted. And so I appreciated those touches that made it feel believable and fun.
I remember, I think it was a quote from American McGee talking about Doom and saying at the time, like people were playing Doom and he was working on Doom and it felt real, right? But you look at it now and it feels, incredibly, it's cool, but it feels dated. And then even, I was a huge fan of American McGee's Alice, but I look at it now in its original form and it's completely different to how I remembered it. That's why I asked the question.
No, there are definitely parts, yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of, you're talking about that whole idea of, you versus the machine. I mean, there were social games on the Atari, right? I mean, there were multiplayer experiences, but I think both in the 500 game and Enduro were one-player racing experiences.
Yeah, they were one-player racer experiences,
Yeah.
and I just, perhaps as an introvert, appreciated that.
Yeah. Do you think, okay, this is going off on a tangent here, but do you think social gaming is purely a construct that's been sold to us by game publishers as the future of gaming? Because I'm not really a social gamer. Like I enjoy playing with, friends occasionally in Fortnite, playing with my son, but I really feel like we've just had it shoved down our throats, like social gaming. But
of course,
I don't,
because
yeah,
that's free marketing. That's real virality. Organic virality is this game is fun. I want to invite my friends to play it with me, and then you get organic growth. And so I think you're right in terms of, is it an evil corporate tactic? I think you get, people get money, get more bang for their buck if they get a hit with a multiplayer game than they would with a single player game that really is an asset that decays in value quite rapidly. You sell it for, well, maybe GTA 6 will change all that when they sell it for 130, whatever they're going to sell it for. But it's going to be it's harder to make money on that. And unfortunately, that's what drives a lot of decisions.
So, you talked about the kind of importance of the memory of the acquisition of the title. So going from, those games, what is your kind of next memory of acquisition or the next title that really made an impression?
So again, my father played a big role, right? It was my birthday this time, and he walked me out to the back of the car and opened up to a Nintendo. This is classic 80s memory of many children. I got the action set, which does not include Mario. And you start to learn that at school. Like, what do you guys talk about Mario? I'm playing Duck Hunt and I'm playing Gyromite. And then instead of using that robot, I put the little gizmo on my feet, and I would use my feet to play the game. It's still a brilliant game, and that robot still is cool. It's cool. It was always a cute story, isn't it? How they got the Nintendo into stores by making it more of a toy. Thanks to the 2600 crash, stores were very reluctant, right, to stock another machine. In fact, it was like, I think that set may have only been like in the tri-state area, because I was in New York, New Jersey at the time, and they sold the new Sears. So I went through kind of perhaps a bit of a classic Nintendo experience. My dad said I have to beat Duck Hunt before he'll buy me a new game. So I'm like, screen to the screen, gun to the screen. And I went out and I bought Excitebike, I bought Kung Fu, I got the gold disc, the gold cartridge of Zelda at Crazy Eddie. I saw that, I had that. But one of the first games I bought with my own money, I think it was like $40, $45, was Ninja Gaiden, and really fell in love with that game. It's action, the wall climbing mechanic, the boss battle, the cinematics. I mean, it's unparalleled at the time. It was so compelling. And so I love that game to death, right? But I never actually did beat it. I did it eventually, but not in the moment as a kid. And then I think it was through Nintendo Power, right? I learned about Ninja Gaiden 2, but I also learned that it was going to be at the Nintendo World Championship at the Kravitz Center in New York. And so I got my dad to take me, or maybe with my mom, I think with my dad. And big memory, right? You go through the tunnel into New York, go to the big convention center. And there, they had the big screens, with people playing Rad Racer and Tetris and the championship stuff. But it's like E3, you could go and play games. And so they had Super Mario Brothers 3 there, but they had like Al Unser Jr.'s Racing. I remember playing that there. And they had Ninja Gaiden 2. It was like, it's fun to make a sequel, isn't it? Because you have kind of this core game. You can kind of fix what didn't quite work, right? They improved the wall jumping, so you don't have to do the little gimmick. You can actually go up and down. They give you this incredible cool new power-up buddies. To this day, I don't have any tattoos, but I'm going to get a little, Ryu with these little buddies right here one day, promise you. Or maybe I'll just get a temporary tattoo sticker, call it a day. So love that game to death. Had great levels, just like Enduro, in the sense that as you progress through the game, they really changed it up, and they added environmental features like wind, that worked with the different boss battles. They had one level that's completely dark, but it's a storm and lightning flashes, and then you can see, which, when you're doing a platformer with like little pillars is a pretty compelling addition. So I love the environmental effects it did. And it was a touch easier. And so I was actually able to beat it. And so I really appreciated its difficulty curve and so on. So huge game. And the other side of the coin, which is funny, in Nintendo land, was Dragon Quest, Dragon Warrior, when I played it. And it's funny to me now because I'm just today and this week, I'm still playing Dragon Quest 3 Remake. So it's been like 30, 40 years. And so this game was the opposite of Ninja Gaiden. Instead of being action, it was more laid back and chill. And I still appreciate to this day that they haven't changed that system, that it's all turn-based. You get to wait. You can really feel the power because it's all, it's very simple to understand. Everywhere you go, it's got an inn and it's got a shop, right? And it's got everything you need. So I love that simplicity of it, but it was calm and tranquil. A lot of RPGs now, they try to combine the action with the and maybe it's even Dark Souls. I guess really is an RPG action game, but
Well,
in
yeah,
any case,
I think the Final Fantasy VII, remake started to push more into the action. And I mean, the Persona series, Persona 5 still had the turn-based, but like really ramped up, So have you ever, as a designer, like have you ever designed kind of a turn-based real-time strategy?
it was never turn-based, but I tell you, when I went from Rockstar to Zynga and had to work on Cityville and Farmville, that was a different style of looking at spreadsheets and trying to understand rates and understanding what a free drop rate should be and what are the different drop rates for all the different events, and being a lot more analytical. That was a different style of game, a different way of playing. And I think that's exactly, it is a Dragon Quest model, right? You have to figure out XP curves and when to level up, right? And the fact that you level up quickly in the beginning and then you kind of slow down, and how you can give different, what you give when you level up and so on, to create the right pacing. So it's not just a pure linear experience, that there's the ebbs and flows. And we often talk about movies and the kind of the classic 3-act structure and the rising action and the denouement. It's like the only French word I ever remember, when it all kind of is all buttoned up at the end. And how many movies use that formula again and again, and just tweak something here or there, or don't even tweak it at all, and be just fine. So it was a different way of making games. And I think if you always just try to be as flexible as possible and learn as much as you can as you go throughout your career.
I think it's important to note about Dragon Quest as well is that, Akira Toriyama created the game's art. He's the creator of Dragon Ball, and more recently, Sandland, before he passed away. And that is a huge part of that franchise, is the art style, the character style.
Is the art. Yeah.
And then there's, anime, multiple anime series from that. It's pretty influential. And I also think that time, so, this is around 90. I think, Dragon Quest was a little bit earlier, but that's also like, it must have been incredible to be the Kravitz Center at Nintendo Land right when The Wizard had just come out, and it was like peak Nintendo time, because
it was. And I was a kid.
Yeah.
It was, I soaked it. I still think the 80s, of course I'm nostalgic towards it, because I was like the age, I was 3 to 13.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
I was prime. But at the same time, I was actually jealous of the 13 to 23-year-olds, because they were going to the Iron Maiden shows.
Yeah.
And they were actually going to the Motley Crue shows. I was just like, listening to their tapes. They were actually old enough to go to the shows.
I think Australia always, growing up in Australia, there was always a delay in culture arriving here, especially in the 80s. So like, I'm 45, but I remember growing up watching Happy Days and MASH and stuff, because that was airing on TV when I was like 4 or 5 years old, and so we definitely had a culture delay. We didn't get color television in Australia until 10 years after the US. There was a massive gap. And then, so the internet has been a game changer for Australia. But yeah, we experienced things much later. So I'm sure we were watching, The Wizard, like right into probably mid-90s. It was still relevant for us at that period.
That's really funny.
Yeah, I don't know if it's things people think about, but yeah. So after this experience, you kind of, your tastes evolve, consoles evolve. What's next?
So this is, let's see, what is next? Because it's it starts to get into a little bit of a blur between Super Nintendo or PC. I think Super Nintendo preceded it. And now, of course, I played, Mario World. I actually played Super Mario Launch here, right? Like, oh, I finally played Super Mario. And then I picked up Super Metroid. And I had played Metroid 1 and maybe a little bit of 2. And it's funny because I say Super Metroid, and I think you know it. And I think most people know it. But I was talking to my friend 10 years ago. I talked to him, and he said, "Oh yeah, I was teaching, and I made a reference to Super Metroid, and no one in the audience knew what I was talking about." And I was like, "Oh wow, really? Okay, so fine. It's side. It's the Metroid, right? You got to explore. That really wasn't what I like that much. I don't like exploring too much. The atmosphere is awesome, right? It's so unique in its tone, but it's that acquisition of weaponry and that build out when you feel like near the end, you're completely badass, and how the gameplay changes with each acquisition that was critical to how I define games, period. Like I know, like Sid Meier's got this definition of, I think a series of interesting choices is a game. That's cool. That makes sense. But I kind of see it as a set of challenges and then this like tool set to overcome the challenges. And the tools are what you kind of make juicy and toy-like, and those always feel fun and different and full of surprise. And I think Super Metroid was exquisite at doing that. And it also, you know, Nintendo's been their whole identity, and I can't wait to see what they show later on, has always been about that man and machine. And to ask itself, what are we doing here, right? In whatever mode they had, it wasn't mode 7, but there was some sprite mode that allowed them to actually do larger than screen characters. If you remember the bosses of Super Metroid, they were enormous. You actually had to travel up and down to destroy them. And so this marriage of machine and design and technology is why Nintendo's magicians. And it's why I found love with, and most Nintendo, I mean, we can do a whole show on Nintendo games. It would be easy as pie because they're just the masters.
Yeah, I feel like I missed out on a whole era of Nintendo. I was a Sega kid. So, you know, there's games that I am aware of, or franchises like Bomberman or like the Mega Man franchise, which I don't think is a Nintendo product, but, you know, it's peripheral knowledge. Like I was not experiencing those in real time. But yeah, Metroid is definitely one of those that I know is revered and I know a little bit about, that I, kind of keen to go and dive in and experience it. You know, a bit of trivia.
Yeah, you've never played Super Metroid?
Oh, I've never played. You know, I have a Switch, but I've never played.
Okay.
But it was, kind of like researching and looking it up, it was the largest file size on cartridge ever at the time of release. So when you're talking about, you know, those giant bosses and stuff, they were definitely, you know, pushing what was possible in terms of games, because it was huge. Yeah.
It was awesome. And funny enough, the next game on my list is another Nintendo game. And acquisition. Blockbuster used to rent games, but then every once in a while you can go and find these bins of clearance games and so on. And I don't think there was a box even. There was this game called Tetris Attack. You know, of course I love Tetris. I had a Game Boy, but it didn't look like Tetris, but it had Yoshi on it, so prominent that I knew it was a Nintendo game. So I was like, oh, this is safe. And I took it home. Yeah, and this game changed my life. It's so simple. And it's funny now, too, because so many of the mobile games, the popular ones, the big ones, like Candy Crush and like Royal Match, and every match 3 owes royalty checks to it's originally, I think it's called Panel de Pon. It's a Japanese game. But I played it as Tetris Attack. And it changed. I took it, I played it all, I took it to college with me, you know, my Super. And my roommates dropped out of college because they played this game so much they didn't go to class. And I felt like I corrupted, and they were a little bit younger than me. I felt so bad. But I would play it with my mates all night long. We stay up and we listen to Prince and we listen to Leonard Cohen and Bowie. And we listened, and it was all night long we're playing this, and my dreams are full of it. The thing that's magical about it, it's my favorite game to watch someone play for like the first time. Because it's so simple, just a cursor that swaps. And you can see that kind of learning by doing. You know, you can see them, okay, match 3, sure, boom, great. And like, oh, what about 4? Boom. What if I drop this? Boom, combo, right? And you can see them learning. And, oh, now that I got a combo, it sends junk over here to the other person. And this junk mechanic was, we used to call them pancakes. We had all this language that develops out of it. And these pancakes, if you cleared anything that touched it, they would convert to playable blocks. So they go pop, pop, and they would do it really slow. And so you could see what's about to drop. So you could set up your board to take it all. And so what happens is you're converting this, like, you know, you're on total defense. So you're about to die because all this junk is above you. And you convert all that defensive pressure into a huge offensive moment. And because I was in school, I was learning about different theories and was in psychology. This psychologist was talking about this theory of flow. And it comes up a lot in games because they're so interactive. It comes up in sports because it's full of challenges and you trying to overcome challenges. And flow is when the challenge and your skills are kind of perfectly matched. So you can think about the extremes, right? When challenge is lame and you got high skill, you're bored out of your mind. And if the challenge is hard and you don't have the skills, you're like frustrated. But somewhere in between is this magical moment. And it actually feels like a runner's high. It has a physical manifestation. And it was that realization of crossing over that I saw in Tetris Attack. I ended up using that technique in Midnight Club 2, which was the first game I got to kind of to work on. It was certainly the first I was lead on, and the first I got to kind of design features from scratch. Because when I saw that same frustration moment, or that same moment of when you were behind in a race, if you're behind a car and you're still racing great, you're still frustrated. Like, I can't overtake them because cars are equally as fast or whatever. And I can't but I said, okay, well, what if we, like draft from the car? Cause that's kind of real life. That people believe that's real, actually. And exaggerate it just a little bit. So you charge a nitrous and you can actually like shoot past them. Shooting was kind of important because you're kind of crossing that threshold from I'm frustrated to I'm powerful. You're feeling you're sending the pancakes back. You're serving flapjacks, as we used to call it. And there was, I like that example because it's a way of converting a game to a principle and then reapplying that principle into a different game. And so I do that with like a talk I like to give about pinball. There's a lovely book and by a professor, who actually teaches where I went to school. He took over the class from Randy building virtual worlds. The professor's name is Jesse Shallon. He wrote the book about game design. And it's got these principles. And so you can look at pinball through that lens. Like multi-ball is like the lens of abundance, like abundance feels great. And, that was even referenced in Star Fox 64, referencing like scenes from Independence Day about like all the little ships. Abundance feels good. That's a cool technique. And so that's what multi-ball is. And so you can do this kind of mapping. And so Tetris Attack, simple match 3 game, but its principles, really stayed with me. So it's my favorite. It's my number one.
I think it's really interesting that, the foundationals of that game have influenced Candy Crush and so many other games. I mean, is it just the quality of the design that has made that stand the test of time and be replicated?
The simplicity of it, for sure. Yeah, I don't know. It's match 3. It's a good design and can be really varied up. Obviously, you see Candy Crush and all those. I can't believe how many levels they make and how many boosters they're able to create in that world. So it seems like a real good, rich canvas that they were able to build on. Even when you play the Tetris Attack, pay attention to the pacing of it. They have the squishies that actually kind of, you can, when you're about to die, they're really like, and the slow frame rate almost helps that game because you're like this tension that's about to die and so on. It's well weighted. It's Nintendo magic.
Where were you going to school at this time? So you were in college at this point?
Yeah, this was in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon, and I ended up doing a master's program there. So before that, let's back up. I went to, even before that, this might even be a good segue for the next game. Because I think back, it's funny. It's like breadcrumbs. Like, I went to computer science. Why did I do computer science? Because back in high school, maybe middle school, my dad bought me a computer, bought me a PC. There's my father again. He bought me a PC. And he took me at some point to one of those computer fairs where probably stolen goods are sold for cash. No, now that I'm an adult, I know what computer fairs are. But in any case, we bought a new graphics card. I think it was like, VGA instead of CGA. And I got F-19 Stealth Fighter because there was this really beautiful purple cover and this cool plane. And it felt kind of ninja-like, right? In its kind of stealthness. And that game was so brilliant. Because you can kind of have such a nice setup. Like you had like this mission briefing, and then you pick out your armament, and then you have your flight plan, and there's this kind of buildup of tension. And so that's one thing that always stayed with me is the tension. And it turns out way later, only like recently as an adult, I found out that was made by Sid Meier. I didn't know at the time. And so that was really cool to realize that. But it's that getting of that PC that allowed me to actually start creating games, or at least coding or learning Turbo Pascal, going to computer science class in high school. I was in the computer club We'd go to competitions. It was just me and two others. We kind of lug our PCs into a gymnasium, and we have these competitions on solving problems, and we just type away. I think we got like second or something. We did all right. And then I went to Carnegie Mellon for a computer science major, but I minored in art because I knew I just wanted to apply, this thing. My father told me that 2600 story when my dad got me that. He told me, I don't remember this, but I told him, you don't understand, Dad. I'm going to do this for a living. And I'm like, I said that when, back at Indy 500, back in Enduro, and I couldn't fathom doing it. But here I was in Carnegie Mellon, and I knew I wanted to just do something with technology. So I did an art minor. I ended up doing like robotic art, and some video games, some light hacking of like, we were playing with like Half-Life's engine and that kind of stuff. But it was when I was graduating that I think it was senior year, I audited a class called Dramatic Structures of Interactive Gaming. And this professor was starting a new program with Randy. And then I ended up taking Building Virtual Worlds with Randy in the graduate program. And then that summer, I got an internship with Angel Studio. So they came out, the recruiter came out to the university, talks to us. I went to GDC and interviewed. No, I think I went to GDC and just, had just the basic hello, hi. And then later I flew to San Diego. I had a proper interview and then got the internship, which turned into a co-op. And I just stayed because the internship was working on Midtown Madness 2. And we finished it off and I learned how to tune cars and tune mouse controls. And then this enormous lucky opportunity happened where Midnight Club 1 was done and the lead designer at Midnight Club 1 went on to program for Trans World Surf. And that left an opening, and I was asked to be lead designer at Midnight Club 2. So I went from intern to lead designer in about 4 months. I still can't get over that lucky break. I always just say, and I think life, particularly getting in the games, is a lot of luck, but at the same time, you just have to do the kind of hard work and develop the skills so that when those moments of luck present themselves, you're well equipped to take advantage of it. That's just my attitude of, it's.
What year did Angel Studios become Rockstar? Like, when was the switch from it? Like,
it was soon after. Co-op? So if I started, I don't have the year in front, but it was before Midnight Club 2 shipped. And at that point, I started the 2.5 years development in Midnight Club 2. So somewhere in those 2.5 years, Rockstar they had already, obviously with Midnight Club 1, developed that relationship. And if you even look back at history of engines, like the GTA, I think 3 was built on renderware, and then EA actually bought out renderware, and you don't have an engine. And here's Angel Studios with a beautiful engine that would eventually become like a Rage engine. So it was a really smart acquisition. It was really just to purchase me. That's what I like to tell myself. No, it was a really great buy, not only in the engine, but the people there were exceptional. Some of the smartest folks I've ever worked with, and some of the most passionate about making art, let alone games. Just they're real artists.
Well, you obviously, worked with the Hauser brothers, who are legendary, who basically defined contemporary video games with obviously Midnight Club, but Red Dead Redemption, Grand Theft Auto,
and Manhunt and Bully and Warriors and all the good work they've done. I think that they were able to just bring, I find it a little simple, but they're able to bring film and music sensibilities to the gaming market. They're able to present themselves. I mean, I look at GTA and I see Scarface and I see Heat and I see all the pop culture references that they were building on. And even now GTA 6, as I see that being revealed, movies aren't as relevant as YouTube anymore. So now it's all YouTube content and they're spoofing. And so that makes sense as culture moves on. And they have to, it's self-feeding, right? They affect culture. And now they're satirizing what's relevant today. So they're brilliant at that, and they're brilliant with music. And they're also, I think, quite brilliant at distilling gameplay down to a very accessible level. And it's it's something I thought about when Take-Two bought Zynga, because I left Rockstar to join Zynga.
Mm-hmm.
And talk about oil and water, like night and day. Those are just different ways of working in different markets and so on. And then when Take-Two bought Zynga, and one, I thought it was smart because it's not, the crossover small, right? It's incremental, and that's kind of what you want in acquisitions. But in terms of understanding how to make games for a mass market, they both were able to bring more players to gaming. Grand Theft Auto through the themes and through the controls, right? Even if you think about like auto lock and the bump targeting that they had in like the early games, is a very casual approach to game playing. That's not, WASD mouse finickiness. It's a different approach. And that's the same thinking that goes into Farmville and Cityville, which is how do we make this as simple as possible so we can bring more people to our game. And Zynga, above all, brought people who never call themselves gamers and probably still don't into the ecosystem. So they both excel at that. So more similarities than they let on.
Yeah, because I think, the perception would be you left Rockstar for Zynga, which is like you left the Michelin star restaurant for the fast food joint. But, I think having that through line they're both about accessibility. Even though Rockstar's games are immersive and full of storytelling, the actual minute to minute of those experiences have to be accessible and they have to be engaging. And I think it's a really, strong observation because, again, from the outside, there's no connection. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I mean, talk about that dance hall full of GTA players and Farmville players. And then what's the Venn diagram look like? That would be a fun evening. But,
I'd love to know a bit about your transition. I'm guessing, I know you're at a startup, but I'd love to hear about your time at EA as well. I think EA is obviously a publisher that we both worked at, but that, has had its fans and its detractors over the years. But yeah, I would love, to learn about your experience comparatively, when you started and your takeaways from working there as well.
I think it has a lot of similarities with Zynga. I think it has a lot of similarities with just the game industry overall, where it was really about understanding live service and how the market had moved to that. The through line I see in my career is just keeping up with the times. I had an analogy when I was working on Red Dead Redemption around 2007. This occurred to me because I turned 30. Red Dead Redemption is based in 1910, roughly. It's like the death of the West. The West is dying, and that's what Blackwater, right, represents with the car, right, that you get at the end is this kind of, and even the whole theme of the game, right? Can't escape your past, right? And so, but 1910, and I was like, holy crap! It's about almost 2010, so it's been 100 years since that period that we're on horseback, right? And a Western, but 100 years is actually is 10 decades. And here I am turning 30. I had a realization that I've been alive 3 of the 10 decades. And then I think this kind of like panic set in, or at least this incredible compression of time, this realization of how much can happen in a decade. And I don't think you get that perspective at 10. You might get that at 20. I got it at 30. I certainly am now feeling it at 40 and 50. Certainly feeling it now at 50. And so you chunk, if you look at music technology, it gets really easy. The 80s were cassettes. You even had LPs before that, where you had cassettes and CDs, or the 90s, and you go right to MP3s, right? And then you go right to streaming. And then it brings you to the current era of the 20s. And I was always going to say it was AR, but I'm more and more now thinking it's going to be AI that's creating the music instead of perhaps the consumption side of it that I thought it was going to be. Right?
100%.
But
like if you
time marches on. That's my saying here is you just have to keep up with the times. And EA taught me, about live, more than any other company, was mostly about live service and how to stay relevant.
Just going back to your comments about AI and music, and I mean, we do live in an era where on YouTube, there's like, all these lo-fi hip hop video, music playlists, and it's all AI generated, or Spotify's, playlists with, spa music, and it's all AI generated stuff. So we are, definitely in an era where we're starting to realize that, the work around is being generated. We're kind of passively absorbing it. And given the fact that you've, 25 years in the industry, and you were talking about those changes, like, where do you visualize AI taking the games industry, say, in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, 5 to 10 years. It's all it is exponential. No, well, we're off to the races here. I was a big fan of Ray Kurzweil's book, The Singularity, and I read that back in 2004. My good friend at Rockstar, Josh Needleman, he turned me on to that book, and I read it back then. I'm like, this book's amazing. But then we get to track it the last 20 years and see how accurate he was. And guess what? He was accurate. Like now we start to fucking panic.
Yeah.
So we're like, well, maybe he knows what he's talking about. Mm-hmm. And it turns out the scariest part about it is that technology accelerates technology, right? And it's not a linear curve. It's an exponential curve. It speeds up. So when you say 5 to 10 years, I'm like, that's like doubling it every year.
Yeah.
Like so that's the scary part, but also the exciting part. We've all been working towards this, so let's not pretend we weren't trying to get there. So I think there's an N64 game called Wave Race. I think some of us know it very well. I was really moved by it because, like Enduro and perhaps even like Ninja Gaiden 2 with its levels, it would create waves were procedural. And so every time you played it, it was a little different, right? And that's where the promise of AI is that we can actually get in there and every time we play it, it's a little different. Maybe it learns from us and maybe it can pass the Turing test and we can do more interesting social things. So yeah. I'm optimistic.
Do you think, like, with technology, I mean, I feel that, you talking about your memories of your favorite games is the acquisition of them. And then obviously everything has turned less into acquisition or ownership, but just like a constant wave of like streaming content and subscription services and the AI generated stuff. That changes people's perception and appreciation of things. So I'm curious, not necessarily about how the technology changes the product, but actually changes the people's desire for the product. I think it's an interesting thing to think about,
Well, we're going to warm up to it, right? I think it takes time for culture to accept new realities, but ultimately they do. And I think when AI starts to be, for me, it's happening quickly. When I work with ChatGPT, I do talk to it with nice words. I treat it like I do a person, sometimes even nicer than a person. And I think as the more we interact with the AI, once we have robotics in the home that have AI embedded in them and we start to develop, I used to, what are those stupid things called? Those little characters,
Furbies?
Furbies.
Yeah.
I used to have Furbies and Tamagotchis, and I used to bring my Furby to play bingo as my good luck charm.
Wow. So I had a Furby that was Mogwai, an officially licensed Gremlins Furby. Yeah, back in the day. Sorry. Yeah, I did.
I kind of knew that right now. Yeah, you stick AI in that, I'm sold. I have an elephant that sings songs to my 2-year-old we bought from Kmart. It looks better than any Disney animatronic from my days. So robotics combined with AI is the future I was promised. I was also promised cybernetics. I would like to do something with that if it doesn't hurt. So let's go.
Yeah, let's do it. Final question. You've had such a genre diverse career when it comes to the games that you've worked on. Is there a genre that you haven't designed in yet? And what would that be?
Yeah, ideally? You know what? And maybe it's the last game I'll talk about is this kind of action genre. Because of my Ninja Gaiden love, like the next game on my list is it came out in 2010, the same year that Red Dead came out. But I always thought it was Game of the Year and not Red Dead. I was even telling my mates, I know we're all celebrating our success here, but I think this game's better than us. And that's actually, I'm sure, controversial because a lot of people hate this game. But that Castlevania Lords of Shadow, I thought was absolutely ace. But again, how you sell yourself. I first played the demo of that game at E3 or thereabouts, and I didn't like it. I don't like that first level. It's way too dark. It's a bit dull, and felt a bit derivative. I didn't like it. But lo and behold, the second level is great, and so on and so on and so on. And every level is distinct. Every level introduces a new piece of the battle system that expands it into this fantastic rhythmic give and take gameplay. You know, a lot like Doom remake, where you've got the chainsaw, I got to heal, or I'm attacking, healing, attacking. They do it with color, and the boss battles are big and epic, and it feels just fantastic. I've always been a big fan. Ended up following what Mercury Steam has been up to, and you know, they did the latest Metroid game, which was I thought was very good. So I thought that was brilliant. And at the same time, because God of War was popular at the time, and that combat's like that, there's this mental game called El Shaddai Ascension of the Metatron. Best name ever, too. And it takes that idea of every level being different to the like 11. It's a complete acid trip. Every level is just like, you know, cell rendered or ink shaded or line art, and it's just all over the place. And it's got this crazy story about angels falling from some fallen angel thing. It's Japanese, but the story I think is biblical.
Yeah.
And so I don't really know what's going on, other than they play with this notion of death, where when you die, you can just pull the buttons and you get reborn. And that alone feels powerful. That alone is like, wow, I haven't seen like, I'm death in games is everything, right? 3 lives, game over. Like and then you get these bosses that really kick your butt. And some of them you're like, oh man, that guy was tough. And some of them, you die, but you're like, oh, I almost had him. And then the story moves on as if you're supposed to die. And you don't know. I don't know. Like, was that boss beatable? Or was I supposed to die? So the way they play with it, the way they, circumvent and or not circumvent. What's when you there's a better word for that.
Subverse.
That's it. That's the word. That the way they play with that is brilliant. And so yeah, I was taken back. So action. I've never done an action game, and I would really, really like to do one. So maybe I will.
Cool. I just wanted to add a note about the last game. Is that it's based on the Old Testament book, the Book of Enoch. And Enoch was an ancestor of Noah, and the kind of overall goal of the game is to prevent Noah's the flood, I believe, according to my research, which is insane.
Yeah, after you play Super Metroid, you play this and tell me if that's what you took away from the
100%, because you don't get a lot of video games based on the Old Testament. Like I think that in itself is pretty great.
On it.
Yeah. Cool. Mauro, congratulations on 25 years in this ever-changing industry, and I'm sure you'll be designing titles for many years to come with your AI overlords, who will treat you with kindness as you've been kind to them in the past, and their memories are infinite. But I thank you again for having a chat today. And is there any place that people can follow you online, or
just the usual spots? I'm on LinkedIn, and I don't have a Twitter or anything. I should make one. Sure. No, I'll tell you one thing though. If you Google my name, you'll find a famous cinematographer. That's not me, but my name, my Facebook lit up when he won an Oscar that night.
What did he win the Oscar for?
It was for Avatar, I think.
Wow.
I think he's the cinematographer for Avatar. Was it? I think it was Avatar. He did a few. He did The Island, and he did something else.
Cool. Awesome. We're done, and we hit 50 minutes. That was pretty good. Did you feel good about it?
I liked it. Yeah, I liked it. Did we cover all the games? We covered
everything.
Did we really?
Literally everything. Yeah. I think it's good. It's gonna once I'll go through tomorrow and I'll start packaging it all together, and I'll do intro, outro. It'll take a couple by end of week, because I want to share it with everyone. And
just get the I think feedback. If you cut it up with the footage, especially if the El Shaddai stuff would be like, absolutely. And there's so much footage you can grab, right?
I think it's a pretty compelling conversation, because you're talking about a lot of titles and the philosophy and different periods in your life and your career. I think it's compelling, and I just want to see if other people think it's compelling, like in the team. You know what I mean?
I know. I do. I hope it's compelling too.
I think you did a great job, man. That was really good. All right. I need to go drink some water, because I feel like I got dry mouth.
Yeah,
but
desperate.
All right. I'll let you go, man. Thanks again.
All right. Should I leave this open? Because it just says 67% uploaded.
Maybe. Yeah.
I'll leave it. Okay.
Later, man. Thanks so much for listening. You've been listening to Playlist, and this is a podcast produced by the 3000s with intro music by Sam Shepard and also produced by myself, Benjamin Dawe. If you would like updates on the show, you can follow us on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram with links in the show notes below. And if you would like more content, please remember to give us a follow or a subscribe on your chosen platform. We'll see you next time.